Welcome to the Parent Guide to GCSE podcast. Today's guest is Francesca Geens. She's the founder of the Happy Self Journal and joins us today as part of our Child Mental Health Week programme to talk about the benefits of journaling. This was originally broadcast as a live Facebook event.
Welcome to the second in our series of podcasts for Children's Mental Health Week. And today we are talking about journaling. So, Francesca, would you just like to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you came to be doing it, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on today. So my name is Francesca Geens, and I created the Happy Self Journal back in 2018 now, which seems like a long time ago. But basically, as a mother, I kind of approached the mental health of my children and trying to think about their future happiness and well-being. I wanted to do it before they hit their teen years. And I became very interested in the science of happiness. And I kind of did a real deep dive into this fascinating area of research, which has been looking at kind of scientifically trying to understand what makes us happy and why is this important. And I just became fascinated by it. Not just like, obviously it's important to be happy, but actually there's like health and well-being benefits to our happiness, to our personal happiness, but as a society more widely as well. And I became interested in these simple practices that the research was showing we could all do, which would impact our happiness. And the scientists kind of showed that there's, a certain percentage, some say up to 40%, that is within our remit to take up these habits and make an impact on our well-being. And so I kind of ended up looking at that and deciding I wanted to take these simple practices and put them into a simple journaling format that was easily accessible to my children. So at the time they were, I don't know, like 9 and kind of like quite young. By the time we launched, my daughter was kind of probably about 12 or so. So we soon after launched a teen edition, but that's really where it started, kind of trying to create something that my own children could use.
So with this deep dive, I mean, you had what I'm going to call a proper job at the time. So you combined, was the science of happiness anything to do with what you were doing in a previous?
No, not at all. No. So at the time I was running a technology and productivity consultancy. So I was running that as a business. My own background before then was kind of in art history. I worked in the art world for a long time. And the science of happiness was just a side project, a kind of real interest. It was kind of little snippet articles in the papers would say things like, scientists have shown that being out in nature impacts our well-being. And I was like, but that's so interesting. Like, we know that, but why is that? Or like, research has shown that practicing gratitude has like this amazing long-term impact on our happiness, or kindness does good. And I was like, this is so interesting. And that's how I ended up going into it. And I juggled running the business with family life and then carving out little bits of time to do a course on it, do the reading, and then decide that I wanted to like start putting it into a kind of physical book format, and then committing to taking it to print and seeing what would happen.
Awesome.
I love the story. It's a very, very brave move, but clearly absolutely flying now. So what's what's your favorite part of the journey so far?
Oh gosh, I think it would have to be the connection and the community with the parents that buy our product, who then write or email in or kind of DM on Instagram or Facebook and send me little messages and photos of kids using the journal, or the stories of the impact that it's had on their children and on the wider family. And I don't think I was prepared for that. It didn't occur to me. I was kind of, you work on this product and you put it out in the world and you literally don't know if you're going to sell any copies. But I hadn't thought that far ahead, that like people were going to get in touch and share the benefits. And that's just been amazing. And I honestly, I never tire of getting those emails in and the feedback. It's so lovely.
Yeah, it's my favorite bit too. I think when we get the messages from parents and we get to hear the stories behind things, and you get to kind of put the human aspect to it. It's I will never get tired of that. Definitely.
Can I be nosy? What was your first print run, just out of interest?
We printed 1,000 journals. That was the minimum the printer would do, and or that was in any way viable. And I literally said to my husband, "I have no idea. Like, it literally, if it takes me a year to sell these, like, we're happy to commit the time and money we put into this, and the rest will be what it is." And we launched in August. And by December, we had already had more than 3 print runs, like, because we sold out so quickly. I literally didn't know what hit me. It was crazy.
Amazing. That's it's clearly so very needed at the moment. So that's part of what we're talking about this week with the Children's Mental Health Week. There's so much going on. So anything that can help positively impact on their happiness sounds amazing. Now, you used the phrase earlier, the science of happiness. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's not something I was familiar with either. And in a way, I wish they would teach this in schools and kind of bring it more into the day-to-day curriculum. And I'm really pleased that we have things like Children's Mental Health Week. And even in the years since I launched a journal, I've seen a lot more going on within schools and within kind of wider, kind of society about mental health awareness, which is clearly much needed. But I think it goes further back than that. Like, it's more basic. It's, we all have mental health, but equally we all are striving to live happy, balanced lives. And so understanding which habits support that is really important. And we've grown up being taught about the food groups and doing exercise, but actually I think the narrative is shifting now to be this more holistic approach. And it's not that mindfulness is woo-woo, but it's actually, no, the science has now proven why mindfulness is good for us and how it can impact our nervous system and how it can help us feel less anxious. And I think the more we can educate ourselves and our children to bring these habits into daily life, the better for everyone. And so what the science of happiness is doing is actually understanding, like, breaking it down. So doing really interesting studies, like, if we give people a gratitude journal and they do it for 7 days, can we measure the impact it has on their happiness? And not only have they done that, but they were able to figure out that they did it for 7 days and they revisited the group a week and 6 months later, but the impact of it was still there. So they've managed to identify, and this is very new and ongoing research, I should say. So it's constantly evolving, which I find equally fascinating. So, right now, the kind of habits that they've identified and which I've tried to bring into the journals are obviously gratitude practice, kindness. Kindness is a fascinating area of research. Obviously, mindfulness. But also things like self-compassion, forgiveness, like active listening, connection, all of those things which can be quite hard to define or maybe to practice. I try to find kind of subtle ways to bring them into the journaling prompts, just to get not to get the kids thinking necessarily about it, but just to bring it into the day so that it becomes a normal thing to do or to consider.
Can I ask, because with the gratitude, I mean, we do a thing called, or we used to, when we had a house, it's a long story. We used to do a thing called positives of the day. We do it at dinner time. Now, having listened to one of your previous podcasts, I think you do gratitude of the day, or 3 things to be grateful.
We call it top 3 things.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you do that? Or why do kids need that, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, what do you call it? We ended up calling it top 3 things. I think the alliteration just sounded nice, but in the research papers, they talk about 3 good things. And that's kind of where they're coming from. But yeah, we also originally we'd been doing it around the table at dinner as a family, and I think this is a really lovely way into bringing a gratitude practice into kind of family life, and out of, say, the journal, which is maybe a more private thing. You can also put your little gratitudes onto notes and into a gratitude jar, which sits on our kitchen table. But the whole idea of gratitude practice is basically, the science shows us that you are strengthening the positive neural pathways. So the more we practice looking for the positives in our day, the stronger those pathways, and the less we are. I mean, our brain is naturally very good at ruminating and focusing on the negative. So we're trying to make it look for the positives. And that's why doing the regular gratitude practice helps. And the science also shows that it's important to kind of be quite authentic and conscious of doing it, which is why doing it as a practice, writing it down or putting the notes in a jar or sharing it in the family helps. You're not just kind of like going, oh yeah, I've had a good day. You're like, okay, what was it about today? You're thinking through things. You're focusing on like, how did somebody help me? Which is really important. That's where the kindness comes in. How did I help someone? Like, did I notice a little thing today? And so you're just basically helping wire these pathways. And so over time, and it is a practice, so like any sporting activity, if you want to get better at a particular sport or a musical instrument, you do need to practice. It's the same processes going on. That shift starts to happen. And you see it happening. I will never forget, this happened with my own children when we first started doing this. Is really hard at first. You'll sit down and they're like, oh, school lunch was nice. And then they'd want to repeat that every day. Like they need help. You do need to kind of help prompt them, which is again why doing it at dinner is good, because the parents can take the lead, give your own examples, and like maybe prompt the kids or like, suggest things and they get the hang of it. But my own son, once he got the hang of it, you'd be out and about with him and he would see something or something would happen and he would tell you live that this was going to be in his top 3 things. So his brain he was looking out for them. That's like, for me, that was the evidence that was happening. His brain was starting to identify the positives and note them and want to share them. And I think that's what's really important. We're all too good at getting stressed out and dwelling on things going wrong. And I think what's important to say is the science of happiness or working on your happiness is not about getting to a state where everything's perfect and you're always happy, but it's about being able to, accept that, life has ups and downs. But by focusing on the positives, it allows us to put everything into perspective and we can build resilience to deal with the problems, the challenges, the stresses that we all have in day-to-day life. And so it's about finding that balance. And yeah, the gratitude practice is really just the simplest, most powerful way into that.
Emily knows exactly why I've asked that question. There's a possibility that our twins, who are 19, one of them, no names, is occasionally Captain Negative. I don't know where we read about this positive of the day, but it was just singular positive. But what you said is absolutely true. It has made a huge difference, and he has started to look, far more positively at things rather than coming to the table and moaning about something. There's always I know I've got to come out with a positive, to actually looking at the positives live as you go through the day, thinking, that's going to work for me for later.
Yeah, it's the something effect, and I can't remember the name, but it's the thing when you decide it's kicking things. When you decide you particularly want to buy yourself a new, a Mini, you suddenly see Minis everywhere you go, because you're telling your brain what's important, and that's what it then looks out for, because it acts as that filter, doesn't it? All the things that you see all of the time, all of the day, it filters out the things it thinks you don't care about, that aren't important. So I think it's been retraining our brains to know that the positives are the important things, which just makes you more likely to notice them, because your brain just goes, oh yeah, another one.
Yeah, and the research shows that doing that allows us to be better at coping with stress. It will help us deal with the anxiety levels. It will just, and even on a kind of physiological level, there are amazing things happening. I'm not the, kind of scientist expert here, but when you read the research, it's fascinating how they can bring it back to cellular level changes and the impact that it has kind of on our health as well. It's just so interesting.
Yeah. So why journaling specifically then?
Well, I think it's a nice way to, capture the gratitude and the other things that I wanted to bring in from the science of happiness. But like journaling as a concept is ages old, and has a long and beautiful track record of helping people reflect and kind of process their thoughts and their days. And there's lots of research kind of backing all different types of journaling, not just gratitude journaling, as being a good practice. But I think if we take it into kind of the today, and if we think about our children and especially our teens, I think what I really wanted to do with ours, so it being a physical product, was creating this kind of sense of calm, screen-free, safe, quiet place, a beautiful place, beautiful pages, a nice kind of tactile experience where there's nothing like pen and paper, and just having that space and having a page which isn't a blank page, because you can journal with blank pages. I personally have never managed it. It's great, if that's something that you enjoy doing. But I personally prefer a slightly more structured page where there are just a few prompts to get you going. It doesn't feel too overwhelming. There isn't a ton of white. You don't need to write paragraphs. You don't even need to write full sentences. You can doodle, do words, checklists. So I wanted to create a space that, our kids could go to just reflect, process the emotions of the day, the good, the bad, the difficult. But despite all that, have the gratitude in there. That's on every page. And then to bring in kind of prompts relating to those other, science of happiness kind of pillars that I mentioned. I just think it's really important. Our kids, we all are really switched on. We're on calls, we're on our phones. In the pandemic, we've all been on Zoom way too much. And technology has been amazing at supporting us and is an important part of our kind of happiness, connection, work, and everything. But I do think equally it's important to have positive offline experiences. And for me, journaling is one of those. Just a few quiet minutes, just switched off, kind of with your own thoughts, I think is really powerful.
Amazing. And so if you've got, let's say you want to suggest this to your teenager, because I can hear all the parents listening thinking this. You want to suggest this to your teenager, and you know that what's going to happen is you're going to get the eye roll, and that's about it. Tips for kind of, I don't know, selling the benefits of it to your teenager, because I can imagine I would have been a bit like, yeah, but what if my brother or my sister finds my journal and reading it? And so how do you kind of sell it?
Yeah, I think those are all fair enough. And I think, as with anything, like, it's absolutely important to agree on these kind of guidelines and rules around privacy. So, slightly to answer your question the long way, like, for example, obviously I started it with my kids before they were teens. And when they're younger, we would do it together because that was appropriate at the time. And then my daughter's older, so she, at a younger age, started doing it on her own, and I kept doing it with my son. So obviously she's 16 now, and so she was my guinea pig for designing and creating our teen edition. And so yeah, she has it in her room and she gets on with it, and obviously it's completely private. Nobody else to see it. Nobody kind of she only shares what she wants. I think with eye rolling teens, I think just be honest and suggest it as something that's their time for them to find a way to fill out in a way that suits them. I've structured it that it's suggested you go daily, but they can figure out what suits them and offer it to them as, just a private space for them to like process and doodle and be creative. I've had lovely photos sent to me of people being super creative on their pages. Like, if you have a teen who's particularly arty, you could do a collage, you could, like, draw on the page. You don't necessarily need to do a lot of writing. You can make it more kind of arty experiences if you wanted to. And for some teens, it may be that they want to move on to do much more free journaling. So I know some kids, they really do like to write and process more. And then, maybe they just want a lovely blank notebook or more of a kind of scrapbook type space where they can be creative and bring all of that into it. So I think there's a lot of ways to approach it. I think absolutely kind of letting them get on with it. The book is self-explanatory, and kind of, I think modeling it as well will help. So for example, if you're doing the top 3 things at dinner, you're bringing some of the practices into family life. And again, I know what teens are like, so probably easier to introduce it a bit earlier, but like, we've definitely as a family made a lot of these practices just part of life. So I'll keep my journal. Like kids will see me do that. They'll see me do kind of headspace practice. We'll do the top 3 things. We have the gratitude journal. We talk about acts of kindness. So we're kind of bringing all of that into like the day-to-day family life. So there's nothing weird about you having a journal on your bedside table in our house. And so I think, modeling the behavior and doing some of it yourself will just help normalize it in the home.
Is there a kind of, how long should they do it for? Should it be an everyday? Should it be an ad hoc, just when they want to put stuff down, or how does it work? What's the recommendation?
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think the nice thing is that it's there's no rules. So for example, like I personally think it's nice to do it every day in terms of habit formation. So it becomes part of your day. You're more likely to do it, like how we brush our teeth. If you're gonna do it ad hoc, you might forget, or there's, like it becomes harder. So maybe like start it daily and then use it as you need. But I think daily is nice, and literally it can be like 3 minutes. Like literally, it's not, you don't need to carve out a whole half hour. I think bedtime is good because you already tend to have a bedtime routine. We brush our teeth, we might read a book, people have their little rituals in the evenings to help wind down. And I think helping our teens have a good evening routine is important, because phones, technology, homework late, notifications, and I think as parents we need to be on it dealing with that. So if we can kind of have some screen-free journaling time as part of maybe reading in bed, or if they're listening to music to wind down, is a really good idea. They can process their thoughts, get any worries, get all the ruminating stuff out, do their top 3 things, and actually end the day like having processed anything difficult, thought about some good things, and kind of like that's a good way to go and like have a good sleep, basically. Some people like to do it in the morning, but I think that's harder for kids when you've got school and school run and school routines. Like, I don't know where people find time in the mornings, but I suppose if you're an early bird, then yes, you can definitely find time in the morning. But I think just a few minutes at bedtime, and keep the journal like on your bedside table with the pen ready to go, or even on your pillow, so that it's like you see it, you need to touch it in order to get into bed. You know what I mean? Like it's going to make it easier to do that practice at the end of your day.
I can imagine how if you're looking for a pen, there's a good reason to then not do it, because it's about procrastination, and teenagers apparently quite good at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is it more important to write about positives so you feel good, or negatives so you can unpick what the problems are?
Yeah, I think it's important to process whatever feelings there are, and if there's lots of negatives, we need to deal with them and acknowledge them. So I think it needs to be a bit of both. Like on our pages, I do have the top 3 things prompt on every page, and we tend to do the kind of negatives through a row of emojis, so they can kind of circle the ones that they identify with as a way of dealing perhaps with slightly more difficult things. It's really interesting though, when I designed the pages and tested it on the kids initially, I had more of the like maybe negative prompts, like to help, like you say, kind of flush these things out. And the feedback was that they didn't like ending the day necessarily with it so blatant on the page. So the emoji kind of ended up being the mopping up of the range of emotions. You might want to pick a few, and as a way into that, the teen journal does have more space for free journaling, and so there are some little prompts scattered about encouraging them to deal with and process, or ask for help, or talk to someone if there are kind of worries, or kind of like the more negative feelings, I suppose. Yeah, definitely everything should be acknowledged and dealt with, but yeah, finding the right balance.
Yeah. You've talked about, you've obviously got the children's version, the teenager version, and you've got an adult version as well, right? A parent version.
Yeah, so we during lockdown we were super busy, and we launched a teen version, and we did a My First version for early years, and then most recently we added one in for the grown-ups. because I had lots of grown-ups using the junior with their kids, which I thought was super cute. And then they were using the teen, which actually I enjoyed using the teen one myself. I used that for ages until we did the grown-ups. So then we just did a grown-up version. So parents who want to join in or like model the behavior can have their own yellow journal next to their bedside tables.
Wow. And what sort of, I mean, say between the teenager and the parent, what are the differences?
So the teen one, I put it into like the design and the layout of the pages is much more kind of geared to teens. It actually feels a little bit more grown up than our grown up one, if you know what I mean. So the grown up one actually ties back more to our junior edition, which has our cute little characters and is a little bit kind of cuter in that sense. And the grown up one I've kept they're all quite lighthearted, but the grown-up one may be a bit more, just so that it ties in nicely if you're doing it with younger kids. But the teen one really, it kind of, the look and feel sits on its own. And I've given them a bit more kind of space for free journaling. It's a whole different design and color palette, and theirs goes in like a weekly cadence. Because I think, if you think about the school week, this kind of, one of the things I wanted to help introduce was this idea of like thinking about your week. What's coming up? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you have projects or a test this week? Kind of did a little bit more like getting organized. Is like the mother in me couldn't resist kind of slipping in a few practical things. So at the beginning of the week, they're encouraged to think about the week ahead and to also maybe set some intentions and be like, well, is there a particular positive habit that I should try and focus on, or what, do I want to like try and get to bed earlier, or am I going to try joining a new club, or should I try and, like, am I going to try mindfulness this week? So it's kind of encourage them to test these little habits to see if they like them. So they have like the week, and then they have their daily pages. And then at the end of the week, there's like a double spread, which has a few optional journaling prompts. And that's kind of to have that wider reflection of like, okay, what happened this week? Is there anything I want to like write or doodle about? And so that was more my approach with the teens, whereas none of the other journals have that kind of weekly kind of reflection or structure put into them.
And if parents are listening and thinking, this sounds like a good plan, because I'm listening and thinking, well, my child might quite like that, where can people get us from?
So you can find us at happyselfjournal.com. So you can order from us direct. Though I'm also very excited to say that we're now in Waterstones. Oh, they're not the teen one. The junior one's in Waterstones. So I was going to say you can get that at any Waterstones branch now, but not yet the teen one. So the teen one, you do need to come to us at happyselfjournal.com.
But that's probably a fab place to finish.
I think so.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really interested in the whole thing. So I'm going to be reading more about this science of happiness and investing shortly in one for our daughter. So thank you.
Enjoy. No, it's been lovely chatting to you.
Thank you very much. So we've been the Parent Guide to Education, and this week we're talking about Children's Mental Health Week with a variety of topics. So make sure you tune back in tomorrow. If you're listening later on the podcast, then all of these should be available by now.